At the beginning of Invincible, Mark Grayson is just a regular teenager. He goes to high school, reads comic books, and lives a seemingly normal life. Except for one major detail. He lives in a world full of superheroes. And his father? He's one of the most powerful of them all. Known on Earth as Omni-Man, Mark's dad, Nolan, is a Viltrumite, a near-invincible alien race that looks human, but possesses godlike strength, speed, and the ability to fly. As a half-Viltrumite, Mark is destined to inherit those powers too, though his human side means they take time to emerge. For as long as he can remember, Mark has dreamed of becoming a superhero, of flying through the skies, protecting the planet, and maybe even earning some fame along the way. But more than anything, he wants to live up to his father's legacy. However, once Mark finally gains his powers and becomes the hero he always aspired to be, he quickly learns a harsh truth. The life of a superhero is nothing like he imagined. In this video, we will see the most cruel, heartbreaking, and brutal events that Mark had to live through during the Invincible TV series, proving that despite how cool it may seem, being a superhero in this universe sucks, and more so when you are the son of a Viltrumite. Now, I'm only covering the events that occurred in the series so far, because if we're talking about every bad thing that happened to Mark during the full comic series, this video could easily last an hour. But if you would like me to actually make a complete video of this, leave it in the comments. Now let's get started. Battle Beast. After only a short time of being invincible, Mark decides to help Titan to confront Machine Head in an attempt to get him out of the streets. But the mission quickly spirals out of control when they discover that Machine Head had anticipated this and hired a group of villains to defend him. At first, things go relatively well. Mark struggles a bit but ultimately taps into his power, quickly taking down the enemies in an epic, high-energy moment. It seems that the hero is finally taking the reins of this battle.
Who's next?
Until Battle Beast decides to intervene. From that point on, there's absolutely nothing the heroes can do. Battle Beast wipes the floor with Mark, hitting him so hard and so relentlessly that he's left on the brink of death. Our boy doesn't even have a chance to fight back. This battle was over the moment Battle Beast appeared on screen. I know that the show isn't identical to the comics, so this version of him may not be quite as powerful as his comic book counterpart, but he's still easily one of the most powerful characters in the entire universe. There was no scenario where an inexperienced Mark could even come close to beating him. It's almost funny when you think about it. Machine Head somehow managed to hire Battle Beast, which is basically like Kingpin hiring Thanos to fight Spider-Man. Fortunately for everyone in the room, Battle Beast wasn't there for senseless killing. He was there to find a worthy opponent. After realizing that none of the heroes were up to his level, he simply left.
There is no honor in killing insects.
But not before leaving several of them, including Mark, on the verge of death. Omni-Man's Betrayal. Everything changed for Mark the day he discovered the truth about his father. Until then, Nolan had been his hero, his protector, the man who taught him to fly and to dream of being like him. But that idealized image was shattered into 1,000 pieces when his father, with a cold gaze and no trace of humanity, revealed to him his true purpose on Earth. He did not come to save it, but to prepare it for their conquest. Mark was paralyzed, unable to comprehend. This revelation was a direct blow to the soul. To discover that the man who raised him with love, who shared family dinners, saw his mother as a mere pet. When he refused to accept the cruel reality his father was offering him, Nolan no longer tried to convince him with soft words. He beat him again and again with the conviction that Mark was wrong for defending such a weak species as humanity. The battle that followed was devastating, not only because of the power of the blows, which shook cities and split mountains, but because of what each one meant. A father tearing his son apart to impose a cruel vision of life on him. At one point, fed up with Mark's refusal to give up on humanity, Nolan held him in front of a moving train, forcing him to watch helplessly as dozens of innocent people were slaughtered, their bodies colliding with his. As if the emotional devastation of betrayal wasn't enough, Nolan made Mark witness the death of thousands just to prove a point. Covered in blood, broken and barely conscious, Mark still pleaded with his father. He begged him to remember who he was, to remember their life together, but he only responded with fury and disappointment, telling him that he made a mistake in raising him as a human as he became soft. Finally, he threw him into a mountain where he gave him one last chance to recant. But when he was unsuccessful, he started punching him again and again and again, determined to render him lifeless. But then, in the climax of this devastating scene, Mark, bloody and barely breathing, muttered something that stopped Nolan in his tracks.
You, Dad. I still have you.
He reminded his father of the love he feels for his family, no matter how much he tried to deny it. And in that moment, Nolan hesitated. He suddenly felt lost, conflicted, confused, and then he flew away. Still, this wasn't a victory for anyone. The trauma of the events was not only a physical beating, it was the total collapse of everything Mark believed in. He lost his father, his innocence, and part of himself. It was a wound that would never fully heal, and that would mark the beginning of his true journey as a hero. Breaking up with Amber. We know that in the first season, Amber wasn't exactly the best girlfriend to Mark. She was immature and egoistical to him. However, after Mark's battle with his father, Amber became more aware of the pressure he constantly faces. So, when they reconciled, she became much more understanding of Mark's actions and responsibilities. Naturally, Mark's life as a superhero meant he had less time for a normal relationship. Sometimes he'd have to ditch a date to save people. Other times it was much worse, like having to leave Earth for 2 months to help another planet. But as a more mature and empathetic partner, Amber was able to understand, as painful as it was. Then one day, just as Mark finally has time for a romantic dinner with her, the Viltrumite Anissa appears, like a terrifying ghost. She grabs Amber by the neck and coldly threatens to kill her if Mark doesn't follow her orders. Having no other choice, Mark has to comply with her request. So he goes to the skies with her, where he has to hear once again about the so-called benefits of the Viltrum Empire, warning him that Earth must be prepared for their arrival, or face fatal consequences. At this point, Mark already knows firsthand how ruthless the Viltrumites are, so he refuses. Just like with his father, this sparks a brutal beatdown. Anissa beats the living hell out of Mark in this fight. He manages to land a few punches, but it doesn't even hurt her. Then she slams him into the ground and chokes him nearly to death. Before leaving, she warns that if he continues to resist, someone even worse will eventually come. Someone who won't show mercy to him or to his planet. Mark eventually returns to Amber, who's still visibly shaken, traumatized by the feeling of Anissa's hand around her neck, ready to rip her head off. She tells Mark that she can't go on like this. She can't live a life where she doesn't matter, where months go by without seeing him, or where people want to kill her just to get to him. She simply can't be a part of his world. In tears, they both agree to end the relationship. Mark is left heartbroken and reminded once again that he'll never have a normal life as long as he is invincible. Angstrom Levy. Shortly after breaking up with Amber for good, Mark is called by Angstrom Levy, who has undergone a horrific transformation since his last appearance. After the dimensional accident that fused all his multiverse variants into one deformed body, Levy can no longer distinguish which memories are truly his. Blinded by confusion and hatred, he directs all his anger toward the original Mark. Now, he is holding Mark's mother and his newly arrived little brother, Oliver, hostage. Mark tries to reason with him, but this guy is too far gone, convinced that this version of Invincible is not only guilty of his current situation, but also a murderer, like the evil variants he remembers from other universes. Using his portals, he traps Mark in other dimensions for weeks, while cruelly torturing his family in the meantime. Eventually, Mark manages to escape through one of the portals. When he sees his mother seriously injured, his rage explodes like never before. However, Angstrom also has a way to defend himself, since the scientists who helped him after the accident also managed to make him stronger to fight Mark. So this unleashes a brutal battle between the two that crosses several dimensions. At first, Mark tries to restrain himself, but Angstrom's constant threats against his family push him over the edge. In a moment of uncontrollable fury, Mark unleashes a barrage of brutal punches in a hauntingly familiar scene. By the time he stops, Angstrom is left seemingly dead, and Mark is drenched in his blood. As the haze of rage clears, Mark becomes painfully aware of what he's done. He doesn't just feel regret for killing a man, he feels guilt for how he did it. It wasn't a last resort, it felt more like an execution. This is a turning point for Mark. He fears he's becoming what he dreads most, like his father, Omni-Man, someone who justifies violence in the name of the greater good. He's consumed by guilt, fear, and self-disgust, questioning if he is doomed to become the very thing he swore never to be. The most painful irony of all is that Mark was torturing himself for nothing, because even though Angstrom was so disfigured that it seemed impossible for him to survive, he actually did. The Invincible War. After being completely disfigured by Invincible's blows, Angstrom somehow survives, rescued and nearly fully healed by scientists from another dimension. Now, more furious than ever, Levy devises a plan to take his ultimate revenge against Mark. He decides to gather all the evil Invincible variants from across the multiverse and send them to wreak havoc in the world of the mainstream Mark. Not just to destroy his home, but to ruin his reputation forever, turning the world against Invincible. Levy sends these evil variants into Mark's universe, triggering one of the most chaotic and devastating events in the entire series. To quickly recap, these versions are either evil, cruel, or simply dehumanized by the experiences of their respective worlds. Many of them have conquered their planets or become ruthless dictators. Mark, along with hundreds of Earth's heroes, tries to stop them, but they are almost completely outmatched. In the midst of a battle against two of his variants, Adam Eve, who is now his current partner, ends up seriously injured, which only worsens everything for Mark regarding the situation. The losses among both civilians and superheroes are massive. Many well-known heroes die in battle, sacrificing themselves for their world and their people.
My entire goddamn skeleton, dickhead!
The world has to witness horrific scenes. Cities razed to the ground, innocent people killed senselessly. The conflict is so relentless that it lasts for over 3 days. Eventually, the evil Invincibles, having also suffered casualties due to not being as strong as our Mark, decide to stop everything and rebel against Angstrom. So, having no other choice, he traps them in a deserted dimension, abandoning them to their fate. The entire situation leaves Mark devastated physically and mentally. Levy didn't just ruin the world's perception of Invincible, he shattered the image Mark had of himself. He realizes how dangerous his existence can be and feels indirectly responsible since Levy unleashed all this catastrophe as revenge against him. But as if that weren't enough, while Mark helps clean up the destruction caused by his evil variants, someone even worse arrived.
Stand ready for my arrival, worm.
Not even a week has passed since the Invincible War, and with the perfect timing, Conquest arrives on Earth, the Viltrumite that Anissa warned him about if he failed to complete his duty. A violent, destructive, and sadistic warrior with over 5,000 years of combat experience. Seeing that Mark has made no progress in fulfilling his mission, Conquest threatens him, saying this is his last chance or there will be consequences. But Mark, exhausted, emotionally wrecked, and above all furious, is done reasoning with anyone who threatens him or his planet. He decides to challenge Conquest, starting one of the most brutal and epic fights ever seen. Conquest quickly gains the upper hand, demonstrating his physical superiority without any effort. And now that they are fighting, he makes it clear to Mark that, unlike Anissa, he is not here to convince him about the greatness of the Viltrumite Empire, but because he actually wants to fight. In his own words, he wants to see his fist drenched in blood. As the battle continues, it briefly appears that Mark can hold his own, landing a few blows on the Viltrumite. But this is only a head start from Conquest, as his strength is simply superior to Mark's. He even laughs in Mark's face as he pummels him through buildings, buries him in rubble, and fractures his ribs with a single punch. At one point, when Mark begs him to stop, Conquest taunts him with sarcasm and twisted glee. He wants to torment Mark in every way possible, even threatening the people he loves. For him, this isn't a fight, it's a game. He treats Mark like a toy to twist and break physically and emotionally for his own amusement. It's clear he's holding back, testing how strong and determined Nolan's son really is. The battle is so intense that no one can keep up with them due to their incredible speed. Suddenly, we see Conquest grab Mark by the neck as they fly into another city. The fight has already been brutal and bloody, but it doesn't compare to the shocking, raw scene that follows. Conquest uses Mark as a battering ram, smashing him through buildings and civilians, killing and destroying everything in his path. It's a scene painfully reminiscent of the infamous train moment caused by Omni-Man in Season 1, forcing Mark to relive his trauma in an even worse way. To make things worse, Eve arrives on the scene to help him, but she has no idea who she's up against. She manages to hold her own briefly, even surprising and annoying Conquest for a moment. But the second she falters, Conquest coldly smashes her face and finishes her off with a brutal blow to the stomach. And Mark, who was incapacitated by Conquest, had to watch this without being able to do anything. His whole world was just shattered to pieces. This is the emotional breaking point for our protagonist. Seeing Eve seemingly dead unleashes a primal rage in Mark. He loses all restraint. He no longer cares what happens to him. All he wants is to kill the Viltrumite.
I can see the future. You don't live to see tomorrow.
Determined to end this massacre forever, he launches himself at Conquest, giving us the greatest frame of the series so far. Entering a state of absolute frenzy, Mark becomes numb to pain. Driven purely by adrenaline, he uses every last ounce of strength. Just as his father told him, he began to fight like a true Viltrumite, now posing a real threat to Conquest. Even with all this fury, Conquest manages to subdue him. Now realizing that he underestimated Mark, he prepares to finish him off. Everything seems hopeless right now, but in a miraculous moment, Eve powers make her come back to life, and she fires a bolt of energy that severely weakens Conquest, just enough for Mark to strike. But Conquest, with his remaining strength, breaks Mark's last functioning hand. Still fueled by rage and adrenaline, determined to end this massacre once and for all, Mark bashes him with his own head again and again and again, completely losing it all, not stopping until Conquest's skull is completely destroyed. This moment isn't just a victory. It's a complete character transformation. It makes Mark rethinks his moral code. Until now, he believed he should never take a life, no matter how twisted the villain. But after all the trauma and loss he's endured, he makes a new vow. If anyone ever threatens his loved ones or his planet again, he will kill them. So, as we can see, Mark's life is far from easy. In fact, it could be said that his life became a living hell the moment he got his powers. But it's precisely these events, the pain, the violence, the impossible choices, that push him to grow not only as a hero, but as a person. And most of all, they reinforce the truth. Mark is truly invincible. Not because he can beat every enemy without struggle, but because even after being broken physically, emotionally, and mentally, he doesn't give up.